Welcome to Across the Desk and our new series in partnership with CASDA, the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance. This series is focused on the National Autism Strategy. We hope you'll join the conversation about how this strategy can help autistic Canadians have full and equitable access to the resources they need to live a full life. The time to have this conversation is now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Across the Desk. My name is Elizabeth Plouffe, and I am the host of Across the Desk. And we're back today with our continuing CASDA podcast, a series that we have been doing with CASDA, which is the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance. And we've got I would say, a great podcast today because I'm a data geek. So this is very exciting for me. And I am welcoming members of the working group on the information for data strategy development for autism. And I am welcoming Stephen Gentles and Maddy Dever and Corey Walker. This is the part we talked about, gentlemen, where you have to say hello.
Yes.
Hi.
You can wave, but you also have to say hi.
You can wave. It works. But saying hi is good. Did Corey say hi? Did we get there?
Hello.
You did. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce the gentleman, and then we're going to drop into the see, this is where we might edit. Jump into the topic. So Stephen is a postdoctoral fellow currently doing research with Janet McLaughlin and Margaret Schneider at Wilfrid Laurier University. He has a background in health information and clinical epidemiology, and his program of research is aimed at helping parents and caregivers of children with developmental disabilities by developing knowledge and tools to support the important roles they play in pediatric care. He was a 2020 CASDA Kids Brain Health Network Policy Practicum Fellow. Say that 3 times fast. Maddy has been on our podcast before, so welcome back, Maddy.
Thank you.
See, he knows.
Great to be back.
You get a wave and a thank you. Maddy Dever is an autistic adult and parent of 5 children, which still exhausts me every time I read that, with 4 also on the autism spectrum, living in Carleton Place in rural Eastern Ontario. Maddy advocates with both provincial and federal governments for inclusion and acceptance of autistic individuals and for autistic people to have their own voice in policy decisions. Maddy is a former member of the Ontario Autism Program Advisory Panel and current member of the OAP Implementation Working Group. Maddy is a board member of the Lanark Renfrew Health and Community Services and is active in advocating for increased disability supports to above poverty levels, affordable and accessible housing in rural communities, as well as for adequate funding for long-term care and home care. They have been involved in past campaigns to raise climate crisis awareness alongside their daughters. Maddy has also led workshops and panels on topics surrounding autism and education, focusing on bringing a strengths-based approach to the language that we use regarding disabilities, and recently began a new role with the Canadian Journal of Autism Equity as one of the editors, which is going to be June 9th. We're talking to the rest of the editorial team, aren't we?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome.
And I'm also now a member of the board of directors of CASDA.
Yes, and did you include that, Corey?
It's in the updated one, yeah.
It's in the So
many hats.
Oh, squirrel. We talked about that. So last but not least, I've had the pleasure of knowing Corey now for 3 years, I think, through something like that. That's kind of crazy.
A year or 2, maybe?
No, because I think we met
September 2019, we started planning the leadership summit for 2020 together before the world kind of got sidelined.
Yeah. Good word. Excellent word. So Corey Walker is an autistic self-advocate from Prince George, BC. He was diagnosed with Asperger's in 2001 while in his early 20s. And since then, he has made it his life's mission to empower autistics to live the best life possible and to educate others about what makes autistics such wonderful, unique people with proper supports. Corey formerly served as the project lead for the Sine Family Foundation on the Success in the Workplace, Strategies for Autistic Employers Toolkit project, and also worked for the Canucks Autism Network as hub and spoke coordinator, and will be leading some panel discussions on innovative strategies to support employment agencies during COVID-19 in the new year.
Well, I actually already did that.
Okay. So then we'll talk about that as well. Corey is also a dynamic public speaker who is available to speak at your event, virtual or otherwise. And you have an announcement as well.
I do. Well, I am also on the board of directors of CASDA, if that's what you're wanting, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a new thing, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are our guests, which are amazing. Stephen's like, well done. Props to him.
Silent congratulations to Corey.
You know what? It's an amazing, that's one of the things I love about CASDA. And I don't often put my name behind an organization because I take my reputation and integrity very seriously. And the fact that CASDA has made concerted efforts since its inception, and even more so now, to make sure, as Maddy has mentioned before, that autistic Canadians are not just at the table, but have a voice at the table, building on the nothing about us without us, that they are recognizing the value and the talent pool and just the incredible opportunities we have to encourage autistic Canadians to share their life experience and their learnings, and, you know, well beyond somebody like myself who's, you know, I'm a parent of somebody who's autistic. That doesn't give me the right to claim any understanding of what it's like to live with autism. So I have huge respect for that.
And we see that, you know, in what we're going to be talking about today, the working groups to go over these information briefs, you know, these autistics were invited to this, and not just to look at the end result of something, just what we have a tendency to be, you know, brought in. Hey, do you like this after it's all been done?
Tokenism.
No, we were fully part of this. We co-wrote. We, you know, it's our voice as well as everyone else's voice that was together with this, which is one of the reasons that I decided to get more involved with CASDA.
And that's what I am learning, you know, and I've learned that Corey is one of the most passionate people I have seen on our planning committee around making sure that autistic voices are represented and included and heard. And I admire that about you, Corey. I don't know that I've ever told you that, but we'll do this on a public forum. I do. I love how he holds us accountable. I love how he has no issue. And I mean, in a very positive way, because a lot of people would hold back and not to the betterment of what we're trying to do. And in a very respectful way, Corey lets us know that, you know, that's a little offside and we need to consider it from this perspective, which I appreciate, because there's not enough of that truth in some organizations who support autism. Anyway.
I'm anxiously awaiting the return to in-person events, because
Yes,
virtual events don't work as well for me. So
I don't think they work as well for most people. And I think we're looking at, well, we won't get into it, but, you know, we're lucky that we're able to pivot and offer the Leadership Summit in a virtual capacity, which, as you've mentioned before, we need to make sure it's accessible as possible. And by that pivot and that other opportunity, we're now inviting more people to participate and be part of the conversation. So I hear you. I enjoy the conferences as well. They exhaust me, but I enjoy them. So one day we shall overcome. Okay. So jumping into an overview of the description, again, huge data geek. So this is amazing. So here's what was discussed. The lack of data standardization and linking precludes the necessary complex analyses that could lead to significantly more efficient, targeted care and innovative environmental and policy modifications. As a result, Canada is far from achieving the improvements to quality of life for autistic individuals and their families, and the benefits to Canada from greater inclusion and realizing individuals' unique talents and productivity potential, which could be possible with the data that is available. Designing individualized programs to address unique constellations, I love that word, by the way, of autism-related problems for each individual requires evidence that current research and approaches are not equipped to produce. The critical limitation is the lack of a data system that integrates data from multiple systems of care that autistic individuals and their families interact with. The abundant data on each individual currently exists in silos, scattered across clinical organizations, community organizations, provincial and territorial administrative databases, and large research cohort databases. So, Stephen, can we jump over to you? And you had mentioned about the learning health system and some other things that are part of the context of this conversation. Could I invite you to discuss that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to give it more context, I guess, this is brief. So of the 5 groups that were, the other being housing, and there's research and governance, and employment, and I think services accessibility.
Mhm.
The information group developed 3. This is the first of the 3 briefs that we developed, which were on different topics, and this was on data systems. The other ones will get in the topics that they were about, but the different topics also corresponded to different kinds of information, because information is a broad term, which I can get into, and how you can be more specific and concrete when you're talking about information. But this is about the type of information that we have called data and data systems. So that includes, if you think about any organization that provides services to autistics or their families, they'll have, a data system. So even a not-for-profit organization, will have its client management system with the addresses and information about all the people it interacts with. Well, same with governments who provide services, the administrative databases, big research groups who do cohort research will have their databases. Sorry, there's a chainsaw going on.
It's you know what? I think in 2020 and 2021, we have seen and heard just about everything you can possibly do on Zoom calls. So all good. People are used to that by now.
Another one for the list.
Another, chainsaws, sure. So the learning health system.
So the learning health system is about bringing all the information that's available from these different sources. One of the things that it's about, bringing all the information that's available, about one person that might reside in different places, to be as helpful as possible for that person, but also to help inform care for everyone. So to allow for different analyses of how an intervention works out, or how a program works out for a population of people. You can gather that information quickly in a learning health system in order to be able to respond quickly, and adjust the system to
accordingly,
provide better care. That's the very rough idea of a learning health system, or a rapid learning health system. So autism is obviously more about, health can be defined very broadly. So
right.
So it can include, social health, and social services, for example, as well as mental health, and then your medical health being kind of the core of what people understand as health.
Well, see, my son's data management system, for when we were going through it was brought to our attention that something was afoot when he was 2. And that launched us into accessing multiple systems, multiple agencies based on recommendations. And if I went and grabbed it, I still have it. I ended up with a binder that was about 6 inches thick with a handle on it that could zip, so that I could take that with me to the speech and language pathologist, and to the occupational therapist, and to the developmental pediatrician, and to the nutritionist, and to the, because this doesn't exist. And as a parent, you are simultaneously annoyed and afraid. You're annoyed because the system doesn't exist and it's necessary, and you're afraid that you've missed something.
You have to tell the story again and again and again. Yeah, and so that's the personal way data affects. But from an aggregate, one of the problems of not having a cohesive set of data is we don't have a way of being able to quantify some of the gaps that we know that we anecdotally see in terms of there are pockets of the autistic population that gets diagnosed late. We have different ethnic groups that get diagnosed late or differently, and we see that later on, but we don't have the ability to really see that in a way that we can quantify, that we can use to make the changes to figure out how do we address those gaps.
Mhm.
And without something, we look at we have the National Autism Spectrum Disorder Surveillance System, which is one data set we have that's incomplete, and even in the part that's complete, it's
Sketchy
not,
at best.
it doesn't tell the full picture, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't show the rural or urban divide. It doesn't show Indigenous issues. It doesn't show how there's a much higher prevalence of diagnosis getting done in urban areas. Data affects both the individual as well as us all, and having all of these silos really gets in the way of that.
Agree. And one of my pet peeves is that programs, at all levels of government are created reactively versus proactively, because there is no data to inform those decisions. There's assumptions made on what services and supports, my focus is 18 plus, because there seems to be this massive cliff that once you hit 18, you are walked to the edge and then politely asked to jump. And without the data, there's nothing there to make a case for certain things that are needed. Like, my son is very low support, meaning like we don't get disability, we don't require respite care, none of that. And the challenge with that is the ability to access services for him is strenuous, because we don't have the data to support the need. So you have all of these cracks that people are falling into.
You look at if you look at the ages of autistics, you see a preponderance of research and studies and programs all in the 2 to 9 to 10 age group. Yep. And it begins to fall off in the teens and almost completely disappear as adults. And it's one of the issues that a lot of autistic adults have been raising for the last 10 years, is there needs to be research about what adult needs are, what the transition needs are, what the adult needs are, what senior needs are, all of these things. And they need to be informed by autistics, because,
you're living it.
Exactly. Having research that tells us a story that doesn't involve us tends to miss things, but not researching us at all has created this this policy gap, because without 100%. Data, governments don't act. Yep. Governments act when there's data and everything's being made loud and clear and quantified, but we just don't have that. So yeah, the expression autism is magically cured at 18 is what it feels like, because all funding goes away.
Oh yeah.
If the needs don't necessarily, the needs change, but they don't disappear.
Well, and that's when Corey shared in his bio about being diagnosed later in life. I know what it's like to enter the system with my son as a kid, and you get service on top of service. I can't even imagine, figuring out what's been going on in your 20s and having nothing there.
Well, my diagnosis came as a complete accident. I went to see a neuropsychiatrist at UBC. I had since I was since 1985, when I was in like grade 2, probably grade 1 or 2. I BC Children's Hospital had confirmed my parents suspected I was ADHD. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was told I had all the signs of autism except I could talk. That was just sort of old school diagnostic criteria. And so I went. I was 2001. I was a little bit like over halfway through my university studies, working my BA in English and History at University of BC. And I went to my family doctor. I said, "Is there someone in Vancouver that's sort of an expert in ADHD that can maybe give me some strategies, because I'm struggling with attention, struggling with concentration, and all the multitasking." So I ended up seeing this neuropsychiatrist. Never really gave me any real help for my ADHD. But in typical psychiatrist fashion, picks up on things. I was asking me a whole bunch of questions, And then I saw him twice in 2001. I saw him in August and in November. And so the reason I don't give an age as diagnosis is my birthday's in October, and I can't remember I was diagnosed in October or August or November. So
We're not going to research it. It's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, when I got the report that he sent to my family doctor, he gave this diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. So mom, I went on the net and
hang on, Corey, hang on.
She said,
hang on. Sorry, your internet just went wonky chicken. Try again. So,
okay, my mom and I went on the internet and did some research and found that Asperger's, which is an old term. They don't use that in diagnosis anymore, but that I was on the autism spectrum. And then all of a sudden, to my mom, some light bulbs went off, and she shared with me, well, we were told you met all the signs of autism as a kid, except you were verbal. And so it was, if I hadn't seen that neuropsychiatrist for help with my ADHD, which as I said, I never got, I might have never known I was autistic. Like it was interesting. Yeah.
So obviously somebody was collecting data on you during public school or whatever to be able to share with your parents that this was a possibility. But because there was no central data, no central data gathering, like this project, I know how to say these things and just having a moment. Somebody could have caught that. I mean, one of the things, and I'm sure, Stephen and Maddy, my immediate thought is the more eyes you can get looking at data, the more opportunity you have for different thinkers to spot different trends or different opportunities or different interpretations of the data, which can then have a positive impact. It could have had a positive impact in Corey's day. And now from a government perspective, like Stephen, did you want to jump in on that a little bit?
I'd love to. So one thing, I'm going to start separating the kinds of data a little bit here. So I would say that research data, which comes from a study that starts with a research question, and then you apply to ethics, and you wait 8 weeks and you get approval, and then you start your data collection, and that takes another 2 months, and then you do the analysis, that takes 10 months, and then you go to publish the paper, and that can take up to 2 years.
I'm already tired.
That's a slow process. From the idea of a rapid learning health system, which is more based on experiences of care or service or support or what have you, capturing those experiences and feeding them back to the system, kind of as close to real time as is feasible. So I just want to go back to the image that you presented of in autism as a parent, the binder of many different purposes. So that is, I think, what makes autism the place where a learning health system is most acutely needed. It can be helpful for all Canadians, but for autism, where you're navigating so many different services, it's crucial, and it's a great starting point to develop what I'm going to call is the dream or the idea of a learning health system. Right now, it's just a dream, or
it's a goal.
And the reality, it's a goal that people, some smart people came up with, and that people are slowly doing work in all kinds of areas. So there's all kinds of issues and areas to make a learning health system a reality. And so one of them is linking databases. Another one is, ethics and consent for the use of data. I think there's a lot more enthusiasm in autism for sharing data to, find solutions. But a lot of Canadians are quite suspicious about sharing their data. So that's an issue.
It's a security and safety issue, right? And you hear about, I think it was a hospital in the US recently who got hacked, and everything was frozen. They couldn't book tests, they couldn't access records, whatever. So not to put the fear of data gathering into anybody, but it's a reasonable concern that as part of this strategy, how are you going to protect that data, and where is it going to be housed, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So going back to the brief,
Yep.
the brief is proposing taking some baby steps towards a learning health system. And one of the issues is, as Maddy mentioned, we need some basic data about before action can happen in terms of policy or organization of care within the government funded providers of care and services. So basic prevalence of autism in Canada. There's the Public Health Agency of Canada did a study, and where it went to different data sources that varied across provinces and territories in order to calculate what the prevalence of autism is in Canada. And because it's different in all provinces, it's not standardized like a common data set or common data elements. It was a lot of work to do that. And so it's been done once. As a result, in the States, the CDC does this more regularly. So that number gets updated
more accurate.
More frequently. And as there's all kinds of reasons why the number is going up related to how sensitive we are to knowing the prevalence of autism. But I would use the American number before the Canadian number now because it's more recent. And so a solution to that we proposed in the brief is to just for that small problem to find ways to get a common federal reporting of a common way to report prevalence of autism across provinces and territories.
Well, then the data becomes
it's also
exportable and manageable and much easier to. Okay, sorry, Maddy.
Sorry, I just part of it is incentivizing provincial governments to be able to do that. I mean, the study that Stephen was talking about includes 7 provinces out of 10, but it doesn't include Ontario, which is a large population, right? So, and Ontario itself, it hasn't been until this year that they've been able to centralize the collection of data. Everything was regionalized, and every region has. You take Canada's issue with data collection and how different it is in different provinces. It was different in each region, and it's taken a while to be able to come up with that set. But we don't know if that set of data that Ontario's collecting is going to be similar to what the other provinces are.
We've also got the socioeconomic. Oh, something just happened there. That was weird. There's also the influence of the socioeconomic situation within each region, which influences
exactly
the data collection and what have you. And Corey, you had a point you wanted to make on that?
Yeah, well, like for example, in BC, we have they do regular data collection process, but only on children. And the way they do it basically for the kids is whoever receiving autism funding to the Ministry of Children and Family Development. So our numbers in BC is like 1 in 40, I think, is the current one. They update like every couple of years. But the problem is, that doesn't include adults, which may or may not skew the numbers because we know a lot of adults are undiagnosed. But then you've got 140 in BC. Canada is saying 1 in 66. So there's a big gap, which we've talked about some of the reasons because of other provinces either not doing or data collection doing incomplete. But we need to have some sort of like it's great for the provinces to collect their own data too, but it should be a consistent way. Like this is where the federal government's leadership is needed. We got 10 provinces, 3 territories, all right now doing their own thing. I was shocked to hear that Ontario didn't have central data collection. I always thought Ontario would have
been
opted
out.
Yeah, that's just wow.
We opted out because I'm in Ontario.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
So there needs to be, and I don't have a problem with provinces, territories doing their own data collection, but there should be some consistency across the country, which needs to be directed from the top down, from the federal government, because otherwise, we don't. That one in 66, we have. Given that there's a 26, like a huge difference, like 26 people, however you figure out percent-wise difference between, say, BC and Canada, and I don't know what the other provinces have. That makes me suspicious of this federal number. Like, if one province, if there's a difference of maybe like between, say, 166 and 161 or something, okay, that's pretty close. But when you got this huge difference between, say, one province and the federal, clearly the way there's this huge inconsistencies in the way they're doing data collection. Yeah. And it's ridiculous. We're not the richest country in the world, but we're far from the poorest. We're one of the wealthiest. It's not like we've got people scattered all over that, we can't access. We do census, like right now is a census here. So they're doing, they have a pretty good system for collecting data every 5 years for a population and demographics. Yeah. I just held up.
I've got mine upstairs.
Yeah.
And so if we got Statistics Canada that is every 5 years able to put together an amazing amount of statistics on our population demographiks. So I don't see any reason why on earth we can't do the same for autism, or for that matter, for other disabilities as well. Like, it's crazy.
So honestly, a census of disability would be a great thing. I mean, I just went through the census yesterday, Census Day, and they talk. Do you have disability? If we could break that down and ask more questions about that, we could get a much broader sense of a clear picture. I mean, I think from the provinces, it's all about policy and the direction that why is data being collected is because why is data being used, right? And if governments are collecting particular data to drive programs, but not necessarily to drive a future thinking of how things might work, they're going to be it's going to be very short-sighted and very, very narrow in focus, which is why one of the reasons why we do not see any data, very little data collection about adults, right? It's 0 to 18 is really what they're focusing on. So we need I guess what we really need to do is have the broader question is, do we see as a society it's important to be able to collect the data to provide better services to our disabled citizens? In this case, we're talking about autism, but it could be a broader question about disability and removing barriers. Policy is guided by data, and we need to change the sets of data, and we need collaboration in order to be able to do that. We need the silos broken down.
So in the vein of, this keeps flipping around, it's freaking me out. Just hang on one second, Corey. So in the vein of change, Stephen, I just wanted to come back to the policy brief and jump into, if we can, some of the recommendations that were made, because to everybody's point, conversations and decisions are influenced by data, and by taking on this working group and creating this opportunity to collaborate, some recommendations have come out. Could we discuss some of those, Stephen?
Sure. So for this particular briefing, maybe we'll have time to talk about of the three briefs. Probably if we need to skip one, getting to the last brief would be good, which is on language.
Yeah.
And
under integrating data systems, there were some recommendations that were made there. Maybe we can wrap that part up.
How we developed the recommendations was for our group to begin by understanding some of the constraints and what governments can do and what different levels of government can do. So here, these recommendations were to the federal government. And so one of the constraints in Canada is the provinces are responsible for delivering care and in health, but all kinds of services. And so we're never going to have one system that provides, and even the idea of doing an additional census is there might be a lot more to it than that. So if we can try with one data element, that would be prevalence of autism, to standardize that
Right.
that across
Start there.
provinces, that might be one place. So that was recommendation number 2. And recommendation number 1, as Maddy alluded to, was to provide grants to, I think mostly researchers, to incentivize the study of administrative databases in each of the provinces and territories across the different sectors, so education, health, and social, to identify strong models that provinces and territories can follow to developing some of the ingredients for a learning health system. So that would be a set of minimum data elements, not very elaborate, some basic ones, and then ways to cross-link across other databases. So not just administrative, but how can we link with data from clinical organizations that provide care, or community organizations, or even large research groups. And this would be probably a patchwork that would vary in different provinces, or different, because services are different, and we're not going to change that.
But we also want to try and preclude organizations and provinces from creating such an individualistic system as to prevent them from any type of data linking, right? So some kind of minimum standard on what a system needs to be in order to facilitate that integration across multiple databases. As I think what you're saying under recommendation number 1 is like something that should be, here you go, start with this. We'll figure it out after we get going. That's sort of
a few basic data items that can be consistently collected and standardized across provinces. That would be one starting point.
Okay.
As well as
what we have right now is a massive cascading Venn diagram, and
yes,
we need 13 provincial territorial entities looking at some of the same data, but not all of it, coming up with, not knowing what all of the other provinces are doing, and coming up with their own things, and
constantly reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, but also creating massive inequity and gaps, because the data that could inform better policy isn't there.
Yeah. So
we
Corey,
need to shrink the Venn diagram to a much smaller thing, more like the Olympic circles.
Oh, I like that idea. So Corey, sorry, you had a point to make.
Couple things. So first of all, listening what others are saying about reinventing the wheel and everything, I'm just thinking what a waste of tax dollars it is when you're constantly starting from scratch. Governments are notorious for wasting two things.
Sorry, Corey. Hang on. Sorry. So I think what we're going to have to do is, as much as I like to see your handsome face, is turn your camera off, because you're making really great points, but then your computer's not cooperating.
I don't know. It's only a year old too. It's very annoying. But what I was talking about was in terms of consistent data collection, for the census, for example, to Maddy's point about census and disability, my fiance didn't get asked, who has a disability, didn't get asked any of the questions in the census about a disability. Her dad got the long form and had to answer all these questions. And so I'm not sure, maybe it's just to try and minimize the workload for Stats Canada, but not giving everybody the long form. But the problem is, then I don't know how they extrapolate data. I'm not sure what percentage gets long and short, and I'm not going to try and hash it out here, but it makes me wonder, when you've got a percentage of people, only a percentage filling out the long form and answering all these questions, is your data getting skewed? Because it's all random, of course. Stats Canada doesn't know which mailboxes belong to people with disabilities. They're not. People think the government knows that. They don't necessarily know that. They may,
unless they got the long form last time, and then they might.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is, it's, so I'm wondering how accurate is that data, because, it was random. It's possible that, they hit more people without disabilities than they hit with disabilities. Or they could,
Absolutely.
and so that's the thing where I know people complain, and we actually had one census, we had only a short form because the Conservative government said, well, it's an intrusion of privacy, that has long form. Well, no, not really. Not when you realize how important this data is. And it's all anonymized. It's not like it's not like someone can go to the Stats Canada website and say, oh, here's all the people in Canada have disabilities. No, it doesn't get that,
Yeah.
and it would be very helpful, I think, if everybody was always being asked the same questions, especially when it comes to disability, because then you have a much clearer picture. Obviously, the odd person maybe not going to fill it out, even though it's supposed to, but it's going to give you a much more accurate picture of what we have, how many people are autistic, how many people have this or that or whatever,
Yeah.
And I just think we're missing a golden opportunity here, and yes, it would only maybe be every 5 years, but I also recognize that from a cost perspective and a resource perspective, it might be probably rather impractical to do it on a more frequent basis anyway. But then every
Yeah.
5 years, we can look forward to a fresh data on Canadians with disabilities. And that would give federal and provincial governments the information they need in terms of not just for funding programs, but in terms of policy, everything.
Well, to
Because
your,
as you said, Elizabeth,
yeah.
everything is based on data. Every decision government makes, at least I hope, every time they're
Well,
making a decision is based on data.
fingers crossed, but not really. But I mean, to your point, Corey, that, you mentioned about upfront cost of the data collection and what have you, but what about the cost that's happening because of the lack of data? What about the money that's being spent?
That's very true.
Right. So I just wanted to hop back to the brief for a second. And Stephen, were we going to jump into number 2, or what was the next one you wanted to talk about?
I think number 3.
That would be number 3, which was the brief that was, I would say, autistic led.
Would you mind if I read the issue part?
Sure.
Okay. So information brief number 3, communication standards and media campaign to improve public attitudes towards autism, promoting equity and inclusion. The issue, as identified, states deficit-based and ableist language from the past has become unacceptable today because it perpetuates devaluing and discriminatory attitudes to autism and related disabilities. Hells yes. Persistence and pervasiveness of such language and attitudes is a key cause of marginalization of autistic people. Negative attitudes among many Canadians can be subconscious, but they limit access to critical aspects of life, such as employment and housing, and preventing full and equitable participation in Canadian society. There is a corresponding cost to Canada from the lack of access and participation by our autistic population, which has significant unrealized talent and skills to contribute. Language needs to change to increase accessibility and inclusion for autistic Canadians. I don't know who wrote that, but heck yes. Drives me. So my particular focus, right? My company is Spiro Careers Canada, and we are focused on helping to solve the autism unemployment crisis. And so data to me, like when I say I'm a data geek, I'm not being patronizing. I am a huge data geek because service providers are doing their best to support adults 18 plus with outdated or unreliable data. We are also having to fight's a strong word. We're having to advocate strongly with employers to understand the value of the autistic talent pool. And I'm so glad to be doing this one today because we've actually, we're in the approval process for a grant to connect autistic Canadians to job opportunities within advanced manufacturing and eventually trades. And it's something that hasn't been pursued because of this pervasive and detrimental opinion, because I won't call it an understanding, that the autism community would not be interested in working in trades and advanced manufacturing, that there'd be nothing available and this and that. And the more we do the research and the more we talk to folks, it is so wrong. So like 3 to 4 months of our project is devoted to data collection and collation so that we can build the business case to change that opinion and open up the trades and roles in advanced manufacturing for autistic Canadians. My son, and I'll I'll speak to that. And I'm sure you guys have heard this before. There's this prevailing opinion that autistic people love working with computers and want to work in IT or game design. That's all they want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Bless my son, but he couldn't tell you the business end of a computer if he tried, other than turning it on and accessing his iPad for, talking to his friends on Discord. But trades, my husband's a millwright and electrician. Thomas has helped to reshingle our roof. He has helped to remove a chimney from our house. He has helped to build my she shed on the side of the house. He has been working with my husband to redesign our fire pit and create that. He built his own bed out of raw materials and steel, bent it, built it, scraped the end of it to create the threads, the whole 9 yards. Put him at a desk, he'd lose his junk.
I know. Like, I'm glad you raised this, because it's we've had 50 years of a very sort of narrow awareness of autism.
Yes.
And you get these extremes of the very IT techie, almost,
or the good doctor or
person.
whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you get somebody who's nonverbal, can't do anything, that's locked in themselves. Like, these are the stereotypes that don't really exist, because autism is a spectrum, and it's not a linear spectrum. It's more of a color wheel of people who have so many different strengths and challenges.
Exactly.
And every single one of us has different strengths and different challenges and different gifts and different abilities, different stumbling blocks, and different obstacles in the way, different barriers in the way of us being able to do the things that we want to be able to do. And it's those
assumptions,
the language, the assumption, the way things have been really gets in the way of that. We've looked at autism for so long as a negative, just even saying autism, so many people are afraid of saying autistic. And
why?
They're by being, by focusing on the strengths does not mean that you forget about the challenges. It's about accepting both. Acceptance really is what we need. We need, the language we use needs to change in public policy, so that it can begin to change public perception of autism as something that's not, it's not negative and it's not passive, but it's something that it is.
It's a tool to build. It's a tool to build understanding.
Every person has ability.
Yeah.
There's a growth. There's growth. There's needs for people, but it really needs to break down to stopping thinking about all of the preconceived notions people have, and look at what's the autistic individual's needs. How can we accommodate? How can we help them, grow with their strengths and meet their challenges, so that they can thrive and they can, their quality of life can improve. That they can be more included in society, in the parts that so that they have enjoyment, they have fulfillment, and language is really the path to make this happen.
And so I have my postgraduate in corporate communications, so that's my speak, right? And it's been intriguing to be a parent of an autistic Canadian and what I have run into in that role. But I've also seen how it affects my son, and how I have to change the language of the conversations, because I will be he's 23 now. So any school situation, their language is extremely disabling and extremely annoying. So I was going to use a different word, but I always had to correct them that no, you're not going to hobble my son because of your lack of understanding of what he's capable of. All you see is the diagnosis, and you give your ignorance away when you go to the lowest common denominator of what you expect that my kid is able to do. It is a challenge. And part of it, I think, is we have the snowflake situation where nobody wants to be offensive and nobody knows what's the right term to use. so they don't use any terms at all and the conversation stops. I think that's
And that's
part of
part
it
of
as
the
well.
recommendation. The recommendations that we have in this brief sort of start getting to that point. I'll just read recommendation number 3.
Well, hang on,
We
just
recommend
Maddy,
we-
sorry, before we jump into that, Stephen, could we just talk about we're just going to give a little more context, Maddy, if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem.
Just because there's some very specific things in here that I think are worth throwing in before we get to the recommendations. So Stephen, would you have a second to know, Corey, is your hand still up to chat, or is it just, it's kind of hanging in? No. I'm just checking in. Don't have to be sorry. It's okay. You're not. Okay. So it's a Zoom thing. It's all good. So Stephen, if we were to jump into the context, so like the
Sure.
World Health Organization and things like that.
Yep. I'll try to address some of that. So yeah, we make the point that how language is so powerful, and it's a source of inaccessibility. So and the language is also rapidly emerging, like we've started evolving things, capitalizing Black, the journalists started doing that. And so the same kind of changes, I think, to promote equity, inclusion, and all that is happening in autism. In fact, it happened within our group, didn't it, Maddy and Corey? We changed our attitudes to the capitalization idea, which wasn't new. There were other precedents for capitalizing the word autistic.
Well, there's actually a lot of debate about that, and there's not really a consensus, because I don't really like the capitalization. A lot of the other stuff advocates do, and that was new to me. Like, oh, people want to capitalize the autistic. Okay, I still struggle with that. I guess because for me, being an English major, it would have been drilled into me that that's not grammatically correct, and so I'm trying to sort of wrestle that with understanding the perspectives of the other people, and so. But it just goes to show the language is an evolving issue. I know, I'm sure there's more than one, but I know at least one very prominent self-advocate that actually doesn't like identity first language. There's this, I won't name the person, but this self-advocate actually is one, even though the most people, myself included, prefer identity first. When I did that, when we did an assistant worker survey for SNEIV, 47% prefer identity first, 31% still prefer person first, person with autism. So even though, so like a lot of us, myself included, we prefer identity first, and we're very vocal about it. And yet we can't forget that there still are some, it's not just, outsiders, as I may call the non-autistics without meaning to be offensive, who are using person first. There's actually still some self-advocates who prefer that. And it's just, I don't know. I don't think we'll ever necessarily achieve a consensus, because.
But that's the great thing about a conversation, Corey, is that everybody, I'm starting to work with learning more, I should say, about First Nations. And one of the biggest things they say is ask. So if you're talking to somebody, and you make a really valid point, Corey, that it's an individual choice, just like each individual with, who is autistic, their presentation of autism is different. Their preference is their right versus it being imposed on them.
Exactly.
One of the things when I talk about language, which I do frequently, and I talk about identity first language, and I explain, we use identity first language in almost everything we do. We talk about I am this, I am this, I am Canadian, I am this. Anything that's identity, we're very, anything that's considered positive, we tend to use identity first language. Anything that's tends to be felt that is negative or is separate, is has person first language. There's, like I am. You would never say I have a child with giftedness. You would say I have a gifted child.
My child is
that
gifted.
kind of the language.
Yeah.
The reason why things shift away is when there's a negative stigma to something, you want to change the perspective and focus on the person. That's the thinking which most disabled people actually reject, because, like, regardless of if you have to think about them separately, you've got the problem. Not how you identify isn't the issue. It's the fact that you have to think of somebody separate from whatever they're experiencing. But there's always a neutral, right? And I think there is a dichotomy between those autistics who are very much in favor of identity first language and those who are more comfortable with person first language. There is a middle, and I tend to, if you do not feel comfortable with identity first language, but you know that there are people who take real offense to person first language. With autism, saying somebody's on the autism spectrum is a neutral, and I tend to find that that's generally not found offensive to anybody. It's not preferred, but if it's not offensive.
But you can begin the conversation with that rather than assuming person first or identity first. You can start with Switzerland and then move into Italy if you want to.
But when in doubt, ask. But when in doubt, also just talk about the person, not what
not the diagnosis
to them.
Yeah. Let's jump back, sorry, Stephen, into the context for a moment, because there is a part in here that I'd like to touch on around the National Autism Strategy. So
that was the other point that I was going to make, is in addition to the language evolving, and I think Maddy gave such a great description of how the reasons for it. There's also lots that's already there that we can turn to. So we did an environmental scan of national autism strategies for countries across the world as part of our work before the groups were formed. So this is something that the 5 fellows did, and several of the autism strategies already have recommendations for language and media campaigns that we've included in this brief as well. There's kind of World Health Organization calls for eliminating these kinds of barriers. The CASDA itself in its blueprint had a suggestion to create awareness strategies to promote inclusion, and also there are existing guides and standards and literature to suggest the kinds of language that should be used already out there, that need to be surfaced and made
shared.
Made part of common understanding, I think.
So as we're going to head towards wrapping up in a couple of minutes, and because I think this needs another podcast, is what I think this needs, because this is a bigger conversation. But if we could jump into the recommendations just to tie up the bow on the communication standards, I think that would be because this is what it's all about. And I know Maddy's, been on a couple of times, but I always try and bring it back to the fact that CASDA is trying to create a conversation, whatever that looks like, good, bad, fantastic, or ugly. The goal is to at least create space to have the conversation on multiple topics to support autistic Canadians and their right to whatever their future looks like. And whether somebody is nonverbal, whether somebody is verbal and in a career, whether somebody is like, whatever it looks like for that person, their future shouldn't be limited because of not only their own communication issue, for somebody who's nonverbal, but the communication constraints that are put on them by society, which makes it that much harder for them to work towards the future they deserve. So we have here just one of the last points was one of the mandates of Accessibility Standards Canada listed in its departmental plan is sharing information about identifying, removing, and preventing accessibility barriers, which is what this whole working group was about. The whole point of sharing data, the whole point of getting a centralized and standardized database is so that we are removing barriers, not only to effective programming, but for ease of access to services and for easier diagnosis, So that, like Corey's story, where, somebody made a little bit of noise when he was younger. And because we didn't have this database, I mean, kudos, because there are folks in Corey's situation dealing with an undiagnosed autism diagnosis and ADHD who don't end up in the successful position that Corey has made for himself. They don't get the opportunity to attend post-secondary. They don't get the opportunity to be as involved in such an amazing advocate as Corey is, because their diagnoses don't get them, the lack of diagnosis doesn't get them the support they need to succeed. And had this database idea existed, I think Corey still would have tried to take over the world, but it wouldn't have been as hard.
And if
Right?
you take any, you add any kind of intersection of diversity and kind of, racial inequity and kind of like there's that lack of data preventing other people from getting diagnosis, the support they need.
Crazy.
It creates an even different and more stark trajectory that we see.
And on behalf of women, again, I am not
Exactly.
diagnosed, but on behalf of women who are the hardest to diagnose with autism and suffer greatly because of that, they are able to mask and they are able to function and everything else. But a lot of the situations get attributed to other things unnecessarily. And they don't get the help and support and understanding that they deserve to have. So before we jump in, Maddy, because I think we're going to hold that for our next one. Stephen, let's go back to recommendations and hit it, sir.
Right. So in this case, information is information about the fact that language is a barrier to accessibility. So that is what we're talking about, is information, not databases or any of the other, or research. Well, sorry, it includes research, like linguistic kind of research, perhaps. So the recommendations are first for the Public Health Agency of Canada to develop a public-facing media campaign to promote more balanced understanding of autism, as well as introduce and model acceptable language for how to refer to and describe autistic Canadians. Then the next recommendation relates to the Accessibility Standards Canada, in getting them to kind of broaden their understanding and perhaps definition of accessibility to include language as a barrier to see language as a barrier to accessibility.
And attitudes there. Yeah, that's a huge.
And prioritize the development and implementation of new standards for incorporating more respectful, strengths-based language about autism into all government communications. So language standards is a big recommendation within government, as well as language standards used for people who actually are on the front lines of providing services and interacting with autistic people, such as anyone from judicial system, social system,
service providers, education providers. Yeah.
And then the fourth and last recommendation was Maddy, maybe you can talk about that. That was Maddy's idea.
So,
you mentioned this on another. Yes, sorry, go.
Yes. We have in Canada, we sort of celebrate autism in 2 different months. There's the World Autism Month, which happens in April, and in October we celebrate it in Canada. And it's currently it's called the Canadian Autism Awareness Month. And one big change we can make is to actually rename it to the Autism Acceptance Month, because it will move us forward into just changing the language away from awareness, but to acceptance. It gives the idea of inclusion. It gives the idea of not needing, the autistics don't need to necessarily be changed, but we need to be accepted and supported as part of that. So that's a recommendation that we want to make to the federal government to change that act, which is a very small act that just basically
That's not
declares
small.
the month.
That's pretty big. Don't minimize
Yes,
that
well,
because
It's
it's
just by,
I'm not meant. Yeah,
by small, he means it's easy, it's simple, it's achievable, and it's
Agreed.
doable. The impact,
Yeah.
is
It's huge.
significant. But
Yeah. And that's one thing, with supporting my son that we fought against for years was everybody was aware that Thomas was autistic. Accepting it was a different story. And that created barriers with teachers. It created barriers with access to support. It created barriers in that because they were aware but didn't really get to know him, they would pull his support services at the drop of a hat. And they would put him in situations. We almost lost college because there was awareness, but not understanding and not acceptance. They almost took college away from him in high school because of the level of education that they put him in. So this is so critical on so many levels. This work that has been done and acceptance by the government to see these recommendations as vital across many levels. That's why I get a little feisty because this can't continue. And the hard work has been done, government people. You have this incredible group of people who Corey, I see you there. Just give me 2 seconds.
Mhm.
We have in the members of the working group are Stephen Gentles, Leslie Peters, who's the co-chair and the managing consultant from Autism Yukon, Stephanie Cote, who, by the way, is a double black belt, freaks me out every time, policy analyst with CASDA, Maddy Dever, autistic self-advocate, Corey Walker, autistic self-advocate, and we'll clarify that in a second because it's got Seneve, which I know that's done. Janine Lipsack, autistic self-advocate and chair of the Child Bright Parent Advisory Council for parents of neurodiverse children. Minnie Ang, autistic self-advocate, software developer for Kinaxis. Fakhri Shafi, University of Western Ontario. Karen Bopp, who's also been a previous member of the the CASDA Leadership Summit Planning Team. She's with the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Collaboration in Autism at the University of BC. Preeti Kaur at the University of Calgary, and Nicholas Deneme at the University of Alberta. This is not just one or two folks that are making these recommendations and have put the work in. This is an entire team who have done the work for you, government people, on how to make these positive changes. So buck up. Corey?
Yeah, well, first of all, in terms of my job title, I don't have one right now. My contract with Steve and the Canucks Awesome are both ended, so I'm currently between jobs, and hopefully someone will hire me soon, hopefully with good pay. And
that was subtle.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about awareness versus acceptance. And a good example, like my high school, before I knew it, it's just like my career goal was to be a high school teacher. And it took me a while to get accepted into a teacher education program. And I won't get into all the blah, blah, blah about that, but I finally got accepted into an external program by one of BC's bigger universities, offered an external teacher ed program in Terrace, BC, in Northwest BC, where my parents were living at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was on the wait list, finally got bumped up, people left or whatever. I got in, and it was not going too bad. Then I remember the name.
Hang on, Corey. Hang on. All right, try again.
Am I frozen again?
Well, your voice just keeps kind of going funky chicken, but that's okay.
I'm gonna have to yell at my internet provider.
You can do that later. So for right now, high school accepted. Moving on.
Okay. So anyway, November 15th, 2006, me being autistic, not having a filter, and even less of a filter back then, I muttered under my breath after school. I was frustrated. I was in my first practicum. I was frustrated that the teacher there was so busy. She didn't seem to have time to mentor me, guide me, and help me learn to become a teacher. I muttered under my breath, teachers without prep blocks have no business taking on student teachers. I acknowledge it was rude. It was inappropriate.
But didn't hear the whole thing, but I'm thinking it wasn't great.
No, but it wasn't like I told her to, beep off or anything like that. Anyway, long story short, it basically cost my career because I told them I was autistic, and they said, well, that's fine, but that doesn't really excuse it. It's like, I'm not saying it's excusing. I'm not saying what I did was right. I'm not saying it was polite. I apologize. I accepted responsibility. But basically, she didn't want me back in the classroom. The principal didn't want me back in the school. And then he went and told every other high school principal in Northwest BC, all the schools, 3 school districts this program worked in, not to take me on as a student teacher. And I don't know what that would be like today. I'm hoping that today, 14 and a half years later, there's more understanding of autism. But
there's more media outlets to bring attention to that and shame them into smartening up.
Yeah. The thing is again, if there was awareness, they understood I was autistic, but there wasn't an acceptance saying, okay, yes, okay. Yeah. He made an unfiltered comment, reckoning, okay, but he didn't do it in front of the class, and it could have been a lot worse. He apologized. And, why don't we, instead of just kicking him out, why don't we work together and say, okay, hey, let's just work together on a strategy. If you're frustrated, how are you going to handle this better next time? That would have been a whole lot better approach than basically costing me my career.
Blackballing you.
And, ever since then, I've had some decent jobs since then, but it's still been a bit of a struggle. Like, what's my direction? I'm just starting to get a sense of that. But I was with Austin, BC almost 8 years, and Sneed for a year for a short-term contract, Canucks for 5 months. Great. Both those last organizations, really good to work for, but all short-term contracts, and recognize being a teacher this last year would have been very difficult, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. You know what, Corey, I'm 50 and I'm still trying to figure my stuff out. So sorry, Maddy.
Yeah. And all of the statistics have these stories, like this is especially adults. We have this collection of stories of places where how we do things has gotten in the way of being accepted in our work life. It's gotten in the way of our education. People are aware of autism, but it's usually in a negative way, and that's why the language of autism needs to change so that there is an understanding, and really what we're talking about is accommodation. Accommodation brings inclusion, and that's what really acceptance is.
And we're gonna end on some of that note, in that this working group was brought together between CASDA and the Kids Brain Health Network. And the stuff that I'm learning as host of this podcast and getting to know, Jonathan Lai jokes that, by the end of the podcasts, I'll know more about autism and programming than anybody in the country. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. The more I have, and I've got a big mouth, I'm happy to talk about it and share and get people in moving. Kudos, gentlemen, like this. And I know the team was diverse, not only neurodiverse, but, gender diverse. And that's a massive example to set about the importance of having that diversity in the conversations that are happening around autism across Canada. And, it's a testament to the fact that that's successful. That is one of the most successful ways to have the conversation and to start creating real data for real change, and whatever that looks like. And I know Stephen's probably itching to correct what I'm saying as far as data and databases and all of that terminology, but he's going to be nice to me right now. I'm extremely impressed and eager to learn more. So I'm going to make the arbitrary decision that we're going to meet again and talk about this further, because it's so critical. And I have felt what it's like personally not to have this. I know what it's like to try and navigate without it. And it is hard. And, government agencies who are in control of what my son can access, and school that are in charge of what his future could be, they need some educating in a spectacular fashion, and they need it sooner than later. And if having these conversations can help that happen, booyah, I'm in. So we are going to wrap up. Are there any final points from anybody?
This is one case where you're not just across the desk, you're on both sides. I
am, and this is the other side that I don't think I've shared on this podcast before. So I'll back up for a second. And I don't think Stephen and Corey were prepared for this. So feel free to engage or not. That we offer the opportunity for our guests to share something about themselves that listeners might not expect. Doesn't have to be anything wild. Amy and I just met and chatted, and she shared that she is a serial rereader of very long series of books. We've had somebody share that they went to the Amazon and tickled piranha, which freaked me out. Stephanie on your team, double black belt. Don't mess with her, boys. I'm telling you, she'll take you down. I happen to be a Marvel enthusiast, and I have a tattoo, and I've shared that, but I also have a background in medicine. I was a medical office manager for 10 years, and then I taught the program for 2 years. So I've been on the sides of a few desks that impact quality of life. And I think it gives me a different perspective on some of these things. So that's why I can get passionate sometimes, because I've seen what happens when communication breaks down and health is negatively impacted. And I've seen what happens when communication breaks down and futures are negatively impacted. And it's critical to have these conversations, uncomfortable or otherwise. So I don't know, Stephen, are you up for sharing something, or did we freak you out there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you've ended it very well. Thanks. Ended the substantive part of the podcast. I'll just say that I used to be a high-level cross-country ski instructor.
Oh, very cool. I used to cross-country ski. Then I kept tangling up my, anyway.
And falling down. I could help with that.
You probably could, but I don't have skis anymore. So that would be a barrier that I don't want to overcome right now. So Corey, is there anything that you'd like to? What's that? Oh, rental. Look at him. He's making the case. Good for you.
Yes. Well, something interesting about me, I love classic country music or contemporary stuff that's traditional sounding. If it sounds contemporary, I will most likely despise it. I feel that
you're a purist.
Music today is not what it should be, but I won't get into that. We'd be here hours, it'd be a long time.
I'm a Mozart fan myself, so I hear.
But yeah, I volunteer at a community radio station here in Prince George. I've been there for almost 13 and a half years now. Wow. And I do 3 radio shows a week. I do a 2-hour traditional country program, a 1-hour gospel program, which isn't just country gospel, it's all kind of gospel, and then 1-hour bluegrass program. And I've been doing the country show the longest, and the gospel show I've been doing since probably about 2009, something like that. I can't remember exactly. And bluegrass show I think I've been doing since like 2011, but I can't forget. But yeah, early January 2008 is when I started. Our station was only a few months old at the time, and we started in July 2007. I started there in January 2008, and I'm currently the longest, next to the station manager who founded it. I am currently the longest serving, who is currently a volunteer because of COVID, but I'm currently the longest volunteer there who's active. So
I feel like I should go get my ukulele.
I'm actually learning the ukulele. I haven't.
Who am I?
Almost a year now. I got to do that again soon, but I wasn't that great. I was getting better at it.
Well, I can, fortunately, my chief technology officer for my company is an incredible musician who plays, I think, 3 different types of guitar, drums, and keyboard. So yeah, if I'm feeling the need to ukulele it up, then, once the COVID restrictions lift, he can come in. Maybe we can have a jam on one of the leadership summit planning committee meetings, and we'll see what happens.
And I can add one last thing about myself that I didn't share last time. I'm a voracious reader of young adult books, and I sometimes co-host a young adult podcast called YA Podcast.
We will talk when we stop recording, because that's my jam. Okay. So I read odd stuff, but that's another story. Thank you so much.
I love mystery books.
I do too. English historical mystery, specifically.
I like American detective fiction, like the Nero Wolfe series. I haven't done a lot of reading lately. I got to get back, and I spend too much time watching TV. But I remember like the summer between grade 5 and grade 6, I'd sit in my fort in our backyard at home, and I'd read like 5 Hardy Boy books in one day.
See? All right. We'll continue this after we press stop. Yes. Yeah. Maddy's like, this is the podcast that never ends. That is true. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today and for the incredible members of the working group. This, again, the podcast is in partnership with CASDA, which is the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance. Couldn't have come up with a longer name if they had tried.
I know.
And in particular, today is all about integrating data and very high level, figuring out a way to increase data sharing across Canada to facilitate easier support for autistic Canadians in whatever capacity that takes, and just making life easier and future brighter for many, many people. So thank you, gentlemen. This is the time where you say goodbye. So you have to come off mute.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you. It's been fun.
Till next time.
Till next time. Thank you very much, everybody. You guys are going to stay on. And thank you for joining us on Across the Desk and the CASDA podcast series. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining the conversation about the National Autism Strategy. CASDA is a comprehensive network of autistic Canadians and autism-focused organizations. Our members are united by the shared vision that a national autism strategy will create improvements in the lives of autistic people for generations to come. Please visit casda.ca to learn more and keep the conversation going.